we're going to be talking a little bit about the data industry. It turns out that people who use DBT also have thoughts about other tooling in the ecosystem, want to be thinking grandly about the modern data stack. And there's been like a lot of news in the last couple of months, some announcements, some acquisitions, some product launches. Julie and I had compiled a list of stuff that's maybe interesting to us, but what's interesting to me is not actually as interesting as what's interesting to all of you. So I'm just curious to hear what's on folks' minds. And if you don't mind introducing yourself, just saying your name, maybe a little bit about like a sentence, who you are, what you do, where you do it.
Who goes first thing? Josh Andrews, work for On-Prem Solution Partners, run our data and analytics consultancy, and of which we have about 20 to 25 people in our DNA section of the firm, and do a lot of work with Snowflake, DBT, BigQuery, various cloud platforms, and we've been working in the data industry, analytics industry for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, something like that. And just hands down, so excited about DBT compared to every other data transformation and testing product. I haven't even really seen a good testing product before this, so it's fantastic.
Sarah, yeah.
I was just going to ask, what type of information are we looking for here? Of like what we're doing with DBT?
I would say, Julia, do you want to?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in. I think what we wanted to talk about a little bit is like the broader ecosystem. I think what we find really exciting about DBT is it's the central part of your data stack, and we can light up a lot of other functionality for people to do their job. It's the core of modeling and testing and version control, documentation. And so one of the things we hope to get out of this conversation is what else is new in your data stack? How can we partner really well? I'll maybe propose one topic that we can go in, but we're super excited and interested about metric stores. And specifically, a lot of people have been doing metrics in Looker, and that's why people love Looker. But one of the newer trends that we've been seeing is that it's unbundling, where there's going to be a separate layer for just modeling your metrics. And I'm curious if anyone has actually tried to build a metric store in-house or how they handle it. Is it all in LookML? That might be an area where we can start, but this is an open-ended conversation of just talking about new trends in the industry, what should people be aware of, and how can we all as practitioners just stay on top of how it's changing.
Hello, I work for OutSchool, which is an ed tech company. One thing that I've been looking at a fair amount is Census, the software, not the act, and pushing information back out to a lot of different locations. And I'm wondering if anyone else has set that up on top of their DBT layer.
This is Keely. I work in AAA life insurance. So I've been there for about a year now. We've been working on, we switched over to DBT within this past year and are still in the build phase of moving everything from our other Redshift and SQL Server, that sort of thing, and just coalescing them all in the same place so it's not confusing. But we haven't started using Census, but that is something we have definitely looked at. It looks amazing. We also have a lot of different types of data that we're working on bringing in. Some of it's batch and some of it's more event-based, because one of our vendors from one of our source systems does event-based stuff. And so we're figuring out how to bring that in effectively. So I'd be interested in learning how other people do that.
Are other folks thinking about tools like Census, High Touch for, is it operational use cases? Is it just easier things that maybe you would have zaps for in the past, but glue together the things that were previously bubblegum and duct tape?
I recently saw that Census is now integrated with Amplitude. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Claire. I usually have pronouns. I'm the DBT community manager. And yeah, one use case that I think is coming into the mainstream is this idea of, so Census now sends to Amplitude as a destination, which means that you can potentially enrich product analytics after the event has occurred. And this is a huge challenge for a lot of companies where you collect like contextual information about someone clicked this button, but it's really hard for your app to send through like a bigger picture of that person at that point in time. How many orders have they made? Are they a new user? You know, just these things that like exist outside of the direct context of that person clicking the button. And so when I recently got my little Census update and they were like, we support Amplitude, I'm like, oh, that's really cool, because suddenly you could start doing product analytics where you're segmenting by like much richer dimensions on like of a user. And I think that's like product analytics still feels like a very unsolved space to me. And I'm really excited about this development. Alex, to answer your question, I'll read it out. Doesn't the amplitude user information only apply to events created after the user details were updated? I'm not sure. I haven't gotten into the nitty gritty of it. I guess I'm like directionally excited about where this is taking us, but we don't have an amplitude account at the moment, so I can't answer that question specifically. If you're more, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I think their model is that all the user information is created and attached to the event at the point of time. So as you update user details, I'm pretty sure, unless it's changed recently, that it is attached to the event in the point of time when you're doing analytics on your event stream. But could be wrong about that unless if it's changed in the last couple of months. You know, I actually wrote something custom to update our amplitude users from our data warehouse, just a Ruby script, but I am looking to move that towards actual like easier use tools like Census or High Touch.
Yeah, it totally looks like, I think I've misinterpreted this, and that is fine. We are all mistakes, but it does look like the census integration is going to update the users table rather than the user attributes on the event. But maybe one day, and or maybe someone's going to build a tool to let me do that. This is why you're in this group, to get the hive mind.
A lot of these integration points are, it feels, suggestions of like more complete and complex integrations to come in so many places, but it's cool to see some of these lines being drawn from all the different vertices. One thing I'd be curious in hearing from folks, like there's been so much conversation recently about this topic of metric stores, headless BI. I don't know if I'm saying words that track with what people have been following. Any thoughts, reactions? Like what's still missing in this interweaving layer between DBT and the BI layer?
I'm really excited about enclosures. I think that's fantastic. Enclosures, is that what I mean?
Exposures?
Exposures, yeah.
Yeah, enclosures, I think, were the things in the United Kingdom that gave more land to a few people. Yeah, exposures, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to be able to process the metadata and then pass it through into reports that we're using at the other end. And so linking it all the way from one end of the chain to the next. So, yeah. We're working for a finance startup and we're building a whole new platform. It's microservices, architecture. And so we'll be processing a lot of event data coming off event hubs. We're an Azure factory. So we've got Snowflake on Azure and a whole bunch of Microsoft stack. We've recently just started using functions, Azure functions, to do a lot of external data processing. But, yeah.
I'll just post in the Slack, but I'd be curious what BI solutions people are using. Maybe if people can respond to a poll in there, but why don't you go ahead, John, and ask your question.
Yeah, so we use DBT and Looker, and the way I'm thinking about it is I would love if someone smarter than me figured out a way to make a metrics layer between those two tools specifically. It's a very common stack for sure. And I think Airbnb just released a blog post about something called Minerva, which is like their version of a metrics layer. And I don't know, we definitely struggle with the fact that all of our metrics are defined in Looker and LookML. And we now have more and more services that need to understand the metrics as defined in Looker, and not a great way to read them off of Snowflake or from a DBT model. So I don't know what the solution looks like. Like maybe it's in DBT's wheelhouse as well to extend the product to be some type of metrics layer that works across BI tools, but especially Looker would be great. But yeah, I don't have any solutions, that's for sure, but that's something that would be a huge benefit for our team.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to respond just the DBT point of view on that. Like we're seeing that a lot as well, where people will define everything in LookML, they'll build their metrics there. And I think it works fairly well if you're a Looker shop, but other BI solutions don't have that same kind of model layer or that core place where you can define your metrics. And then it begs the question of where it should really belong all of that logic? Is that something DBT owns today? We don't do real-time metrics. Some people are creating separate metric stores. Like Minerva, I saw that Airbnb blog, but something I'm really interested in as well is like, how do you bridge that gap for people and unbundle where the metrics logic is from your actual BI system?
Is the core of the metrics definition problem that this whole headless BI and Minerva thing and everything else is trying to solve, is the core of that problem the fact that we want to be able to calculate aggregates or some sort of statistical calculations at various grains dynamically based off of lowest grain data. But the problem is if you pre-calculated a particular grain, you can't do aggregates of aggregates. An average of an average is meaningless, that kind of thing. So we want to be able to dynamically roll up and roll down, but we also don't want to have to predefine like the grain, every grain ahead of time that we want to calculate in the database. Is that basically the core of the problem? Yeah, okay.
Josh, and because in a past life, I was an analytics engineering consultant at a company called Fishtown Analytics, a pretty different one, but that's what it was. And we backed ourselves into this problem of maybe the rigidity is the point. Like the fact that you have to pre-calculate these things and predefine them and pre-aggregate them, and it's always gonna be the same number. No slice and dice, no complex filtering. Like, look, this was the revenue last month. If you don't like it, do something to make it better next month. But there's no futzing with the numbers. I don't know if that was a post hoc rationalization. If we were just like, we couldn't figure out how to do it, so this is how we did it, and we're convincing ourselves it was a good thing that we did it that way. Some of this headless PI conversation is this, could we have it both ways? Best of both worlds. Like the SQL is defined in version control in a semantic layer that lives in the modeling layer, but that SQL or logic, however it's written, is executed live with user input.
Go ahead.
What seems to be working well for us is we're fairly new to DBT. Love the tool, by the way. We push back as much logic as we can back to we're using Redshift, and then we're using macros to contain our business rules, and then we apply the macro into the SQL, and you can also apply the macro to the documentation, and it's a very simple approach, and that works as long as you don't need on-the-fly aggregate business rules at runtime at various levels when we're using Tableau. And that may be a separate way of communicating business rules at the aggregate real-time BI tool layer versus the standard things you can push back onto your database. But I like that simple separation. I don't know if that's an approach you tried, but the DBT macros, you can have a file holding your macros for that model. If you're doing attribution or whatever, just all your business rules live in one simple spot and you're only writing it once, which I love. So input on that. The other thing is we're using Tableau. I would love to see a way to trigger any BI tool job. Like Tableau has refresh. You can refresh extracts. You can publish or refresh a workbook. If there's some sort of call from a DBT job ending to starting that Tableau server job would be incredible. So I don't have to jump over to like Airflow or something else and do it with Python.
Julia, do you think about webhooks at all, ever? Is that a word that means anything to you?
Yeah, I think that'd be a great use case. And maybe we can take the conversation there too. Like part of the two threads that we're talking about is destinations, right? Is your destination a BI or is it a separate app? That was what Census is doing. But I think that there's like lots more destinations for modeled data that we're going to see. And perhaps that's something that we should be building with webhooks, where once your data lands or in your data warehouse and it's modeled, maybe you want to send a webhook to another service or another destination. So we have two candidates here, Tableau or your BI system or apps. Are there other ideas maybe people have on outgoing webhooks from DBT? Certainly there's a lot in metadata world that we're already thinking pretty deeply about, but if others have ideas, we'd be all ears.
So just to confirm, all webhooks from what I can tell are incoming. Okay. At this point.
Yeah, right now, well, they're both directions. Like we will send, let's see, like for our Git providers, we send the incoming webhook to DBT, and then we'll send the message back to confirm that our job has run successfully. And these are pretty well-defined expected transactions that we've worked to build webhooks around. I'm thinking there's certainly a lot in metadata. People want to be able to send the results of a job maybe to a different service or find out some more information. So I think there's a lot of more we could do in webhooks.
Yep. Mike, I don't want to promise anything out of hand, but I think we are outgoing webhooks is part of the conversation there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd actually be curious to hear if there are folks here who use a more complex orchestration tool like an Airflow, a Jenkins, a Luigi, whether in concert with core or with cloud. Like, what are the pieces that you feel that's getting you today? What's the essential glue that it's providing?
Our pain point is like we use a custom Singer pipeline-wise implementation, and it's set up by a really smart data science guy, jack of all trades. He can make it work, but we want to move to something more out of the box and more supportable, where we can handle binary log replication versus incremental replication without getting too custom, and then allow DBT to kick off when that's done, and then allow our BI layer to refresh once the whole data warehouse job is done. And it doesn't seem like there's a tool out there. Maybe that's why we all have jobs, but there's not a tool out there that it seems to handle that. Airflow had some limitations, I think, in how concurrently you could run it. I think that may have been resolved. I don't know, but yeah, I'd love to hear how people are making this work.
Hey, yeah, this is Alex. I'm over at Warner Media. So what we do is essentially we have Airflow set up, and we're utilizing, like, we've containerized DBT jobs inside of Docker containers and farm those off to Fargate. So Fargate is the actual like runner of the stuff so that we can handle multiple concurrency of stuff and not worry about Airflow itself being like a constrained job. And then as far as like how we end up running everything, we've created multiple DAGs inside of Airflow, and we're using tags on the models themselves to be able to discriminate between which sets of models we want to run.
Do you feel like there's anything more DBT could be doing there to help you with that kind of complex DAG splitting workflow? Or do you have the abstractions that you need?
I think the biggest, I just recently read an article by it's like astronomer, I think it was astronomer, where they were talking about basically splitting everything up, utilizing the manifest and being able to dynamically create DAGs, dynamically create the tasks inside of Airflow based off of the nodes and the node relationship inside the manifest. And for me, it seemed really interesting. My hope is that manifest file can be something that's, and I think with 19, the plan was to have it be like more concrete, but using that manifest file to be able to dynamically create those things. Because the biggest problem, again, with Airflow is no matter how big your DAG is, if something breaks about 3/4 of the way through, life sucks for the next day. Refire off jobs on the small micro like model level would be very helpful.
Yeah, we're totally aware of that. And I think it'd be a really exciting thing for us to build where you can create conditions on individual steps. So if this fails, figure out, maybe retry it or kick off an alert and just be able to triage when things don't go as expected. So that's on our roadmap of something we want to build natively into DBT Cloud as well.
That's a pretty cool, I wasn't aware of that astronomer article. A couple of months ago, that would have made me very nervous. But of course, with 019 and the contracted schema for the manifest, that's what we're after. That's exactly the kind of thing we want to encourage. And I wonder,
if I can find the article, I will put it in the Slack channel.
Throw it in the Slack channel.
I just gotta remember where I put it at.
I wonder if there's a potential integration point there with Cloud, the preeminent and premier parser of DBT manifests. There's a lot of work we do to power the metadata API today, and that would be a neat integration point. If anyone knows the people at Astronomer and wants to at them on Twitter for me. No, I'm just kidding.
So I can speak to that article because I was one of the people who wrote it. So I definitely feel that pain point, the problem that we're trying to solve with that, which is we couldn't retry. I'll find it too, and I'll share it in the Slack channel. But it would be, so it's been working pretty well for us, but I think the best of both worlds, going back to that, is I would love to not have to do a full DBT run invocation on every single Airflow task, which is what we essentially do and what we outline in that article. Because obviously the compile step got a lot faster in 19.1, but it still takes time and there's a lot of overhead. So if there was either a first class way to have a single task per Airflow model, per DBT model, excuse me, and not have to worry about the doing a full DBT run, or there's an escape hatch to avoid doing compilation every time we ran that, I think either of those would be great. The first one being really the best of both worlds.
Yeah, maybe I want you to say just another thing about the, like when you make first class task that isn't a run for one model, but I will just say there are definitely some performance optimizations around like the RPC server that the cloud IDE is able to take advantage of by having a manifest in memory, and then just, oh, you want to run one model off that manifest? Great, I can do that without reparsing, recompiling. And I wonder if there's a future, I say, like with no business saying this, where there's also a kind of CI/CD endpoint that you can hit, which also would do the same sort of in-memory performance optimization. And then you say, just run my one model using the same project, the same manifest that we had at the beginning.
Yeah, no, something like that would be great. Yeah, just on the first class point, I'm not sure what it looks like, but something where it's a hack right now. It feels like a hack what we're doing. The fact that we're doing a full DBT run in each of these, we have maybe 100 Airflow tasks in our main daily DAG. So I've tried imagining what a first class integration with Airflow looks like with DBT that lets you run models as tasks. And I just don't know what that is.
Yeah, heard. Cool. Definitely on our radar. We've got, I see 1 minute left. I would just love no sentence, no explanation, but just go around, say like one tool, one company that you're excited about, that you're watching in the space, and just throw it out there, popcorn.
I just discovered Airbytes, which I think is a really cool integration tool, although they lack binary log replication. Hopefully that's on the roadmap.
Cool, cool. Maybe even throw it in the Slack channel so that folks can check it out later.
Dagster looks interesting.
Now we're going to talk about the materialized DBT plugin. That's what I'm all about. What if you could stream everything?
Plus one on that.
Yeah. All right.
Just trying to find my bookmark for that. I couldn't remember the name, but I've been looking at that one.
Materialize. Very cool, everybody. Thank you so much for joining, staging DBT Demo Day, and for joining Breakout Room number 3. It was a lot of fun to talk about the tools and work that you all are doing out in the wild, out in the real world. And we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.